Hello and welcome back to a new Rage Gaming video once again. My name is Hollow and this time we're taking a proper look at Corepunk, the upcoming MOBA styled MMO that goes hard on its very unique take on action combat in this more and more popular isometric camera style of game. We talked about this one briefly in my top 5 most anticipated MMOs, and for good reason, because Corepunk is built by a dedicated team at Artificial Core and has been in dev for over 5 years now. The beta is right around the corner and very soon we should be getting our own chance to play it and decide if this could be a successful MMORPG. Today I aim to share with you everything you need to know about Corepunk, the upcoming MOBA MMORPG. Let's start with some basic details about the game. Artificial Core began dev on Corepunk 5 years ago in 2015, which is why the game looks pretty smooth and polished right off the bat. It's always appreciated when games are revealed once they're close to being finished, rather than like 3 years too early. Anyone thinking of New World right now? Corepunk is set in a post-apocalyptic world that tries to blend dark fantasy with a sort of cyberpunk aesthetic. Looking at the different environments, I think they've done a really good job. As we mentioned though, we've got that isometric camera that seems more and more popular these days for MMOs. Honestly, the only successful ones I can think of right now though are Albion Online or the upcoming to the west, Lost Ark, that we've talked about here on the channel quite a lot. But the difference here with say Lost Ark is that Corepunk takes the pace and combat to that more MOBA style, with intentional use of abilities and bigger cooldowns, slower movement and attacks, rather than spamming them out in a sort of hack and slash way. The question is, will that work? Let's start by talking about the classes and the roles. To begin with, 12 classes will be available at launch, and they're going to add more in the future. These classes are basically unique heroes that we're able to customize and progress. Each class makes use of 3 weapon specs that fill different roles. In the trailer we saw the warrior using 3 himself. We have the sword and shield, ideally for tanking, a 2-hand sword for melee DPS, or the bow for range DPS. These functions are the 3 playstyles that are available to this specific class. Then on top of that, each player has the options to choose between 9 passive benefits with whatever spec they're playing, and you'll choose 3 of these. This gives you a chance to make a more unique build on top of the talents, but I honestly imagine that there will be metas of this, of course, depending on the role and whether you're doing PvE or PvP. Corepunk uses a sort of holy trinity style to the game, where you have your tanks, your healers, and DPS, but then there's the surprise 4th role called the support, so I guess this is the holy quadinity. Supports and healers do seem very similar from the description, but there is some kind of subtle but important difference here. I think we'll learn more about this in the beta. Plus we also have access to artifacts which upgrade your character. Instead of using armor and equipment directly, which is more cosmetic in this game, the artifacts that you find in the world and choose to equip will give you your abilities, up to 6 at one time. So not only will improving your weapons matter, but the artifacts themselves that unlock your abilities create new builds and playstyles. When the beta does launch, we're going to be able to play 6 out of the 12 heroes that will be available at launch, and they've mentioned that they're planning new characters and new classes like the Summoner class after launch. You might have noticed in the trailer too that the character changed their armor multiple times. As mentioned, the armor itself is cosmetic, right? So what we're going to be doing is working to unlock cool cosmetics through in-game feats and challenges to show off different badass sets that let other players know what you've accomplished, where you've been, or hey, just look good, which I think is a really clever way to combine transmog and status symbols. For the world itself and the lore and its history, these will be heavily involved during the main storyline that you progress while you work your way up the levels, traveling around and exploring, but questing and leveling is actually only planned to be about 40% of the game at launch, with the main chunk of content unlocked at endgame or max level. So right from the start, before any expansion or DLC, that's 60% of the content at endgame. That's a really good start that many new MMOs fail on. We see them create fun worlds to explore and play through and have a great experience doing that, but then they drop the ball once you reach max level and there's nothing that interesting left to do other than repeat content. This awareness from the devs already is very appreciated by me. We'll have things like the PvP systems in the form of arenas, battlegrounds, and open world PvP. Then there's all the PvE systems like endgame questing, main stuff or side stuff, the dungeons that come in both solo and group modes, plus they're all procedurally generated, so you're always going to have a slightly different experience. The dungeons having solo or group modes means you can scale the dungeon difficulty to what you're grouped with, or if you're, like me, terribly alone. This is really nice for solo players to be able to jump in and face more dangerous and interesting PvE content like the dungeons and actually earn good loot all on our own. On top of that, there's going to be the world bosses to face too, and the bigger main raiding to tackle with larger groups. Obviously, we also have access to professions in that classic style of gathering and crafting. But hey, interestingly, there's also the unusual types of professions called the hitmen and the sheriff. They sound like they go hand in hand, like the hitman might hunt targets given to them without any worry about who or why, while sheriffs probably hunt those that have committed a crime, such as maybe the hitmen. The thought of a PvP based profession sounds really cool in an open world PvP environment, but once again, we'll probably learn more about that and how that actually works soon. The crafted gear from professions has been said to be some of the most powerful alongside top end PvP or raiding gear, which gives real long-term purpose to those who actually put in the time to master a craft. You can see that they're learning from the mistakes of other MMOs like WoW. Then we have the slower combat, and I think that comes across well in the art style. There's nice weight to the hits and abilities that look crisp and colourful, but it is that pace that seems very slow, and it kind of shocked me when I first looked at it. It's so much more deliberate and limited with the use of abilities and general movement. So it seems like your choices will matter a lot more than just spamming out combos like we see in many MMOs today. Though I am unsure about this slower pace on video or even on paper at that, I do think this is a different style that could be very good. Now it might put people off when they look at it, but obviously we have that question of, does it work? Is it fun? Is it satisfying? Is this skill based and rewarding? That's important. The only way we're going to know is when we play it ourselves. Clearly the fog of war mechanic plays a big role here though in both PvE and PvP, in which enemies can suddenly be upon you as you turn a corner or enter a new area. Huge for open world PvP like we saw in the trailer, or dangerous for the exploration of the seemingly large world, since we have access to mounts and even massive vehicles for bigger journeys like the train we saw too. This is why with the abilities and combat and that fog of war mechanic being very involved, it certainly seems like a MOBA style MMO and the first of its kind that I'll have ever played. Now when it comes to the PvE content, the devs have spoken about their inspiration for this, which is inspired heavily by classic World of Warcraft, and at the time raiding was more of the elite few who could form these massive groups and actually tackle the harder content and the boss battles to be found in the game, working hard to earn their legendary weapons and high-end loot. Just the same here with Corepunk, legendary equipment and the best gear is going to be earned by the most difficult endgame content, and only a smaller portion of the player base will have this stuff apparently. The raiding itself will be done in groups of 12 to 20 players at once, and they're hoping to challenge us in order to earn that best possible loot, in a clear attempt to create status symbols that's part of good community driven MMOs. You know someone's a badass when you see them wearing that one weapon or that badass armor. On the other hand though, I think it's very important that we also talk about the PvP and the open world PvP aspect. Clearly, as we saw in that trailer, players used fog of war to ambush other enemies, and it was very effective and probably frustrating for a neutral player who doesn't want to be involved in that. So it's important that I let you guys know that the PvP is toggle on and off, so you have to choose to involve yourself in it rather than be forced into it, which I'm sure many PvE focused players will appreciate, or hell, if you just want to relax when you're out in the world. With that though, I do hope that there's rewards for engaging in open world PvP and tagging yourself, like maybe 10% increased XP gains like you have in the war mode in World of Warcraft today, or maybe even some extra perks like extra loot or a bit more gold, I don't know, something like that. There is a karma system in place to keep players in check with this open world PvP though, preventing camping or ganking of lower levels. If you do build a lot of bad karma by doing these things, well, they will restrict you on different parts of the game. And on top of that, you can spot someone with bad karma by their visuals, and apparently if you die while you're really bad karma'd, you could even lose artifacts, which are the things that are key to your build. That's a scary and intense punishment for someone going deep into ganking low levels. I gotta wonder how this will work in detail. I don't think we have enough information here, so hopefully we learn more soon. There's also the honor system to reward PvP, not just punishing it, when you're engaging in PvP that isn't something like scummy ganking. So you'll have points to spend on better gear, like PvP focused gear or artifacts for good PvP abilities. We have the 1v1, 2v2 and 3v3 arenas, and battlegrounds like I mentioned to focus on your honor grind and work on PvP rewards in a more consistent and match-made way. Now at this point you might be wondering, what's the business model for this game? Well, Corepunk is a buy-to-play game that will have some cosmetics on sale for an in-game shop. They've already stated that they will never be boosters to gain XP faster, or any mechanic that you pay money to gain advantage over other players, which yeah, is good to hear, but honestly I feel like it's lame that I have to even mention this or we have to ask these questions. Finally, the beta is actually planned right now for Q4 of 2020, so that's October, November, or December, but we still don't have direct word on this, so we don't know for sure. Naturally, I'm hoping that's as soon as possible, so hey, October, but we're gonna have to wait and see. We've gone ahead and contacted Artificial Core, and it looks like we're gonna be in the beta whenever it does hit, so I'm very much looking forward to playing and answering some of these questions we have today, hopefully having a good time too, and obviously making some videos talking about my experience. In conclusion though, Corepunk is a pretty unique take on MMORPGs in 2020, taking things to a slower, more intentional level with many cool mechanics and concepts in place. What makes me most excited and hopeful for this game though is their clear vision for the game. They know what they want it to be and they've designed the game in line with that over the 5 years that they've been developing it. Once again though, that question is, will the slower pace be fun to play? We're not going to know until we get our hands on it, but I just think it might be very polarizing and something players might not be used to. So on that note, what do you think about it? Does this appeal to you? Does it interest you? Or maybe do you not like the idea of it? I'll be obviously keeping my eyes on news for the game and hopefully that beta announcement soon, and then playing it whenever I can. In the meantime, I've been Hollow, you've been you, and I'll see you next time.